In this video, we're going to take a quick look at some of the common chess mistakes. After you watch this video, you may need to watch some of my other videos to take a closer look at some of the important things you've forgotten. Anyway, let's take a look at the top 10 things we forget.
Number 10.
Sometimes we get it wrong even before we've moved any pieces. The square in the right-hand corner nearest to you must be white, and if you stand on your head, you'll see that it's the same for black too. The square in the right-hand corner nearest to you must be white.
Number 9.
Another thing you can get wrong before you've even started is putting your king and queen the wrong way round. Both queens must start on their own colour square, and if you've got letters and numbers around your board, then the white queen should start on D1 and the black queen on D8.
Number 8.
If I attack my opponent's king and don't say check, maybe my opponent won't notice. Then I'll be able to take their king. And I've won! Woohoo! Well, it doesn't work like that. You cannot take the king. You can take all the other pieces, but you cannot take the king. You have to take the moves back. And ask your opponent to play a move which gets the king out of check. Even though black touched the G8 knight, black is allowed to move another piece, because the G8 knight can't get black out of check. And if your opponent moves into check, then it's the same rule. You cannot take the king. Tell your opponent they have moved into check, so they have to take that move back. And play a different one. If you're playing touch move, black will have to move the king.
Number 7.
Often, if you're playing in a tournament, you'll use a chess clock. Each player starts with the same amount of time, and if you run out of time, then normally you lose. After you make your move, you must remember to press the button on your side of the clock. This stops your time from going down and starts your opponent's timer. If you forget to press the button, then your opponent might remind you, but they don't have to, and your time would keep going down. Eventually you would lose. And if you're playing with a chess clock, then you're supposed to press your clock button with the same hand you use to make your moves.
Number 6.
If you're playing in a tournament, then you'll be using the touch move rule. In fact, even if you're only practicing, I recommend using the touch move rule. You may as well practice everything. So you need to be 100% sure of your move before you touch any pieces. The first move you think of is probably not the best one, so keep your hands away from the pieces and do some proper thinking. We'll talk about some of the things you could be thinking about later in this video.
Number 5.
Listen very carefully. It doesn't matter which side you want to castle on, your king always moves 2 squares. So if you castle on the queen side of the board, that's the side of the board your queen should have started on, files A to D, then your king won't end up as close to the corner. After you've moved your king, you move your rook past your king onto the square next to it.
Number 4.
It seems to happen so often in games. One player gets a pawn to the end, and then they have no idea what to do. But there's no need to be puzzled. Checkmate with your king and queen is not that tricky. There are 3 stages to getting the job done. First, you need to use your queen to force the enemy king into the corner. It's best not to give check, but use your queen to make a barrier that the enemy king can't get past. If the enemy king heads off towards another corner, just start forcing it towards that corner instead. Always moving your queen, and knights move away from the enemy king. Stage 1 is complete. The black king can only move between two squares in the corner. If you move your queen to f7, it will be stalemate. It's time for stage 2. The queen cannot give checkmate by herself. We need to bring up the king to help. We need to move the king over to where the action is. It's going to take 5 moves, but that's okay. It will be worth the wait. As you can see, there is nothing black can do. Stage 2 is complete. The king is close enough to help the queen. Now for stage 3, we switch back to our queen. This is the square, right next to the enemy king, defended by your own king.
Number 3.
At the start of each game, your f-pawn is your weak point, defended only by the king, making checkmate a real possibility. Oh dear, oh dear. This checkmate is so famous it has a special name, Scholar's Mate. Black's best plan here is to reset the pieces before anyone notices what has just happened. There we go, nothing to see here, we're just about to start our game. If white starts to attack f7 by moving the bishop or the queen, your first job is to defend the e5 pawn with the knight, and then when the second attacker comes out, you can block the diagonal with your pawn, and you can block the f-file with your knight, and you are safe from Scholar's Mate. And we're down to the final 2 now.
Number 2.
Chess is not a game of chance, like Snakes and Ladders. It's a game for people who think. And the first question you have to ask yourself is, why did my opponent play that move? And the first thing you need to check is, where could that piece move next? What squares is that piece now attacking? You need to look for danger on these squares. This h7 pawn is defended by black's rook and knight, so it's very unlikely that this is what white has in mind. And it's very unlikely that white is planning to move the knight back onto the edge of the board. And it's even less likely that white's plan is to move the knight back again. Black is attacking white's e4 pawn, so perhaps white moved the knight to defend the pawn. Black has 2 pawns defending e6, so white won't be moving the knight here. We spent a lot of time looking at those squares. There's no shortcut. You have to do that thinking. But with practice you will get faster. I've deliberately left the real danger to the end. With white's c4 bishop attacking f7 as well, this is the main reason for white moving the knight to g5. But you have to check all the squares. What if you decided that the reason white moved the knight to g5 was to defend the e4 pawn, and didn't bother to check f7? You must check all the squares. And even that's not quite the whole story. Here white has played the same move, but there's no threat on any of these squares. You also have to check if there are any pieces that were hiding behind the piece that moved, like this bishop. The reason for the knight move is so the white bishop could attack the black rook. Did you spot that?
Number 1.
What else should you be thinking before you make your move? You need to check the square you want to move your piece to. Is the square safe? In this case, the answer is no. So look for a better move.